What is up, guys? Welcome back to the pod. We are back here with another recap of the latest and greatest happenings of this week in the world of professional wrestling. We are getting pretty damn close to WrestleMania, about officially 2 weeks out now, looking at the calendar. Of course, WrestleMania this year is a two-night affair starting on April 2nd and culminating on the 3rd. So we, of course, today will definitely focus on WrestleMania, the card, updated version of that after SmackDown this past week, all that good stuff. But I sadly do have to start off with what I'm sure everyone has sadly heard of by now, and that's the confirmed passing of Scott Hall, Razor Ramon. I'm not going to get too much into it today because by now everyone has already heard, I'm sure, a lengthy recap of his storied career and everything like that. And to be honest with you guys, I can't really top any of them, Scott Hall has had an insane impact on our industry, and it's when you really think about how many different careers he touched and impacted and what may or may not have happened if for instance, he and Kevin Nash never left WWF and jumped over to WCW, that we most likely wouldn't have sparked the Monday Night Wars, and professional wrestling as we know today may not look like what it does right now. So it's an interesting twist and an interesting concept to really think how important certain key players were in the grand scheme and landscape of professional wrestling in the industry itself. Like I said, if he didn't leave along with Kevin Nash, of course, but he was the first guy out, right? He was the first indicator and the first visual concept of like, oh shit, like this, something's happening, especially at that time with, of course, no social media, the good old days, right? The world was completely different too. So the first time the fans see him show up in WCW dressed in that all jean attire, right? The jean vest, the jeans, of course, his hair, just the look and the vibe, like you knew who he was, but it was a different version of him still. It was like a more edgier version, and it was obviously captivating, and it grabbed your attention immediately. And the way that they implemented him and had him just walking through the fans and then eventually picked up on it. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't given away. It was just so well done. And I think if you haven't seen it, if you're a newer fan, you definitely should go back in and just see his debut in WCW and the promo that he cut. And then of course, if you have time, it'd be kind of cool to maybe have that as a starting point and then watch the beginning and the seeds of the takeover in WCW. And then of course, like I said earlier, what prompted WWE, WWF at the time to respond and what then blossomed into the Attitude Era, which everyone definitely knows of at this point, whether you lived through it or not. But that's just one small smidge of the impact that Scott Hall had in the world of professional wrestling. So, like I said, he would rightfully deserve his own podcast to dissect and go through the beginning of his career and just looking at the journey and everything like that. But what I would definitely recommend to you guys is just go back and watch some of his early matches as Razor Ramon, the early 90s matches in WWF. He and just the debut of, I think, the Razor Ramon character himself and the vignettes that they produced. It's just so cool to see how ahead of their time they kind of were in a lot of respects. Of course you have like the 90s style and like regarding like the attire and everything like that, which is cool, but it was something else that he like a lot of people out there have mentioned, he embodied cool, right? Like he was one of the first cool characters that we had in wrestling, and an actual cool character, then like to the T, like you knew like this guy was something else. And he was a character, but he still kind of gave off that feeling of like I could very well see this guy being the legit dude. Like you could picture that version of Razor Ramon walking down the street or just driving down the street in one of his badass cars and just being that guy, but still being a kick-ass version too, and like being the badass wrestler that we all saw him as in the ring. So I would definitely recommend dedicating some time to that. I'm actually going to be doing that after I finish cleaning today and a few errands that I have to do. Going to kind of dive into some old Razor Ramon vignettes and kind of maybe start there and like I said, maybe like the early 90s, and I'm debating on if I want to start there or kind of go back a little bit further in his career, but I'm definitely just, I guess wrapping it up here, definitely going to be spending some time going back and watching some old Scott Hall tapes and just footage, I should say. I mean, I do still have DVDs, so, but they wouldn't be called tapes either, but it's sad that we have to be having this conversation, but he, I hope, felt the love while he was here, and especially in the ending of his career and like the reunion shows that he was doing and stuff like that. I just hope that if first of all, I hope if you made it to one of them that you enjoyed that moment, and like I'm sure that he was appreciative of it, especially from like what Kevin Nash has mentioned too, right? And the Instagram post that Kevin Nash had put out right after his passing. Just how Scott viewed the world and viewed the world of professional wrestling. You just, of course, kind of selfishly wish that he would have been able to be involved behind the scenes more while he was still here. Because I think that his mind would have been just such a big coup for any company. So, of course, I think it goes without saying that we all wish his close friends and family the absolute best, and thoughts and prayers, of course, during this time, and all that positivity. But it's sad, but we as fans can just kind of give him his flowers too. And I think that to kind of wrap it up here too, it's one of those things where we, and kind of, I think too, in a weird way, thinking of like the Big E thing, right? Like seeing all the love and all the support that he's gotten to. I think it's kind of like a reminder to just kind of give people their flowers while they're still here too, and make sure that they know, God forbid, if today is anyone's day, that they were to go out knowing that, they have love, and stuff like that. So I think as humans, we kind of need a reminder of that too. So moving on from that though, but I did definitely, of course, felt obligated to address that situation and the unfortunate situation too. But definitely moving on here. Like I said, I'm going to kind of focus on WWE first, and then in things today with AEW. But with WWE, I there's a few things going on outside of the ring, I guess you could call it, outside of the on-screen world and the WrestleMania hype and everything, that I find mildly intriguing, to say the very least. So if you guys aren't really interested in like the business aspect of it, definitely you can probably skip forward maybe about 5 minutes or ish. But and heads up and FYI, if you guys don't read like show notes or anything, which by the way I never really did either until I started doing these actual podcast shows and recording them myself. But I always try to throw timestamps in there if it's like a recap show or like a weekly recap show, I should say, like today's. If it's not like a specific AEW Dynamite review or a specific pay-per-view review show, I'll definitely throw timestamps in there so you guys can kind of pick and choose through the show if you don't want to listen to the full thing or you don't have time or whatever. But like I said, right now, the thing that I wanted to kind of address first before we get into the actual WrestleMania card and build itself is the lawsuit that's going on between WWE and MLW. Not sure if a lot of you guys have been. I don't really know how mainstream this is, right? Like obviously it's out there, right? But it's not really a focus point or for whatever reason. And again, it may just be me being a little bit more intrigued on like the business side and like the behind the scenes and the business aspect of it. That's what kind of intrigues me, and I think keeps me hooked with WWE and like the wrestling business in and of itself, is just the nature of the beast, right? And like what it takes to keep an industry like this going, and especially with WWE, with them being such a powerhouse. And I'm just like a nerd when it comes to financials, which I know I've referenced here, and like ticket sales and just shit like that. So like I said, if you guys aren't really interested in the lawsuit, definitely take a look at the timestamp here. I won't spend too much time on it, but there has been a recent update this week, which I found was pretty interesting, and especially it definitely has like an AEW tie-in, which is what stood out to me more so as well. But if you guys aren't aware, of course, MLW is suing WWE. They officially filed an antitrust lawsuit against them on January 11th of this year, alleging that Vince McMahon's company had made ongoing attempts to undermine competition and monopolize the professional wrestling market by interfering with MLW's contracts and business prospects. So essentially saying that since WWE is such a powerhouse in professional wrestling and pretty much embodies any type of streaming or any type of market opportunities as in regards to like streaming, like for a weekly distribution for their TV product, whether it's obviously on TV or YouTube or like online-ish type series or anything like that. MLW was pretty much saying that WWE had done specific things, and their hold on the wrestling market was preventing companies who weren't as powerful as WWE, such as MLW. It was preventing them from making any type of wave and any type of progression in the industry in that respect. So that's pretty much what MLW is saying in filing against WWE. Of course, there's a lot of websites out there who have specific like actual court documents and quote for quote recordings and documentation of the proceedings so far. So if you guys are interested in that, I would definitely recommend just like Googling that. It's pretty easy to come across. Obviously, it's a court document and court proceedings, right? But especially with WWE being a publicly traded company, pretty much everything that happens with them in regards to lawsuits and stuff like that is always public knowledge. Now, of course, if there's like a settlement, we as the public will probably not be made privy to specifics like that, but at least the lawsuit itself, we pretty much get the majority of information, and that's obviously not anything groundbreaking or anything like that. But just to give you guys a heads up, if you are interested in like the nitty gritty and like the specifics and reading word for word what they're actually saying, like I was, just letting you guys know, you can definitely hear that and or seek that out rather, but I'm not going to kind of maybe recommend anyone in specific just because it's just depending on your liking. You know, there's some out there that have specific breakdowns and some that just have a generic recap. But anyway, moving on with that. With that being said, WWE, like I said, did have a official response to the lawsuit initiated by MLW, and I found it pretty interesting because they actually admitted that AEW, for a couple reasons, I should say, backtrack and say, but first one being that they actually admitted that AEW is competition, and their response, and because I guess I should say also too that WWE officially filed a motion to dismiss the MLW lawsuit by firstly referencing AEW as competition to WWE and providing an exhibit in the actual rebuttal itself. And what was also interesting is the source. So they actually went back and referenced a posting. I think it was a publishing of a newsletter or something that Wrestling Observer newsletter obviously distributed, and stating that on the October 18, 2021 edition of SmackDown, and on that night, I forget the circumstances surrounding it, but they had, if you guys remember, it was a super show or supersized show, or something super, it was definitely a super show, but whatever moniker they threw along with it, but it was, I think the motto or the slogan for that night was actually supersized, if I'm not mistaken, but something to that effect. You guys get it. They extended the show by an additional 30 minutes, so that entail actually had WWE going up against AEW head-to-head for the first time, with that being against Rampage, of course, airing on Friday nights as well. And WWE, in their response, in their motion to dismiss against the MLW lawsuit, they stated that besides they referenced a few other things, but they specifically with that night on October 18th in 2021, like I mentioned, with them going head to head, they used that in their rebuttal, stating that they don't have a strong, pretty much hold on the industry as MLW is reportedly stating that they do, and with the whole mindset behind MLW, they're stating that with the power struggle and the power hold, essentially, that WWE has on the market, that no one else can do anything, right? But WWE is using now AEW kind of to their defense, saying that, oh, well, look, on such and such date, when we went head to head, AEW actually beat us in the key demo, which I believe, that night, they were averaging 328,000 viewers, AEW was, in comparison to SmackDown's 285,000 in the key demo, which is, of course, that coveted 18 to 49. So with AEW Rampage beating WWE that night, WWE is kind of throwing that in MLW in the court's faces, saying, hey, look, we're not this monopolized company or anything like that. Like, we don't have such a strong hold on the market as you're saying we are, because look, AEW beat us right on this night. See, they're strong competition. They pretty much with no issue and no restraints or anything like that. They were able to secure a deal with Warner Media, of course, getting their TV deal with AEW Dynamite each week on Wednesday. And I chuckle because it's so funny to me. And let me, I guess, pause and say I get it. Before I get WWE's approach to this, and kudos to them. I don't fault them for it. It's just, it doesn't take away from the fact that it's funny to me, because of course Vince is the first one to say AEW is in competition, and of course the Triple H has said they were a pissant company. Now granted, that was at the Hall of Fame before they actually had competition or were going head to head or anything like that, so it was before we really knew what AEW was going to look like, even as a company as itself. So that was in the very early stages, but WWE has dismissed AEW so many times, right? And the fact that they're now being sued by MLW and using AEW as part of their defense, essentially, is so comical to me. And like I said, hey, props to you guys, to I'm sure Jerry McDevitt and the team there. So again, I don't fault them for that. It's just kind of comical that, like, oh, now all of a sudden AEW is competition, and look, like, they actually beat us, and you're acknowledging in public record that AEW beat you. So I find that pretty interesting. But like I said, I'm not going to get too much into it, and there's a full breakdown of the proceedings and WWE's motion to dismiss and MLW's original lawsuit filing and everything like that all over the interweb, as they say. So you guys more than welcome to check that out and let me know what you think. Again, feel free to shoot me your feedback on that and everything in general on Twitter at Twitter, I should say, at ASHMANNS. And then the show's Twitter page is at @KickAshPodcast_. I think I mentioned last week or the week prior, I recently set up a TikTok page for the pod as well, which I'll be throwing some, random wrestling clips to whatever shows I attend, wrestling clips from back in the past, maybe clips from this show, maybe some actual recordings, stuff like that in the future. But that's just kind of like the mindset with opening that page, even to begin with, was just to have the page, right? And to have it out there. So if and when I do need it and I spend and dedicate more time into that as a resource in the future, it'll be there and at least just have a foundation. But definitely feel free to follow me on there, guys. But like I said, moving on from the lawsuit in itself and looking more towards the good part and the fun part about WWE, I guess depending on where you stand in the WWE world right now and these days. But we are, like I said earlier, 2 weeks away officially from WrestleMania, so we, of course, have to get into the card itself. Before getting into the specific updated card after this week's SmackDown edition, we've had a couple updates from SmackDown, but we have to start off, of course, with Cody Rhodes. It's still interesting to me and fun and everything like that, but now I'm kind of getting tired of speculating if he's going to WWE or if he's going to AEW, and just I'm ready to be like, okay, like I'm kind of over it now. Like, either what's that saying? Either shoot or get off the pot, right? So it's like either sign with WWE or go back to AEW or just stay home and do reality TV. Like, do whatever the fuck you want, man. Like, I'm happy you're happy, but I'm just kind of like tired of speculating. And again, like, I'm not really angry or anything like that, but it's just like it was getting to the point where it's like, okay, like let's do this. Like, let's know, you know what I mean? And we apparently have officially gotten report on what he is doing. So according to Mike Johnson from PW Insider, I don't know the exact website, but I know it was definitely from PW Insider itself, and Mike Johnson, he is a pretty reputable source and everything like that, so I'm pretty certain what he has to say here in regards to Cody Rhodes is pretty confirmed at this point. And of course you have Sean Ross Sapp from Fightful.com reporting and kind of backing it up as well a little bit later. But it apparently is official that Cody Rhodes has signed with WWE and is slated to make his either return or debut, depending on how you look at that, at WrestleMania, either night 1 or night 2. Definitely slated for WrestleMania weekend itself. Whether we get him this last go home Monday night into WrestleMania, at this point, I'm kind of not banking on it. I think right now on Raw, my best bet and my best guess would be that Seth is going to be a heavy feature on it and just in the complaining. And he's going to come out there, probably start the show, maybe not, depending on if Brock is going to be there or not. But I think Seth is going to be a focal point in his last ditch effort and journey and quest to do something on WrestleMania. So I think if Cody is going to actually show up at WrestleMania proper, and first if he's going to have a match with Seth, I think we're obviously going to get the final seeds planted on Monday, so we have a pretty good idea of what it's going to look like with Seth. But if we don't, my money at this point, and since it apparently has been officially confirmed that he has signed with WWE, my money would have been on, at this point, just holding off and having him make a shocking debut on Raw, the Raw after Mania, right? Like, that's always been a big deal. But I say that in kind of like speaking out of one side of my mouth, and then at the same time knowing that you can't just not have anything for Seth Rollins to do. But at the same token, I can kind of see Seth being that obnoxious, unofficial host without giving him the actual title as host, because you don't want to necessarily relegate him to that role if he's completely healthy and able to actually have a match. But I could see him being the annoying pest heel on WrestleMania, annoying you on night 1 and possibly on night 2 as well, and then having Cody Rhodes show up on Raw to address him and just kind of going from there. Again, I'm kind of torn, like part of me doesn't, I think Monday, first of all, is going to play a big indicator in what's going to happen for WrestleMania itself, right? I'll say that, first of all. And then, regarding if we get, like, an actual match between Cody and Seth, I just feel like you would have needed a little bit more build. And maybe not, like, I'm sure I've made a devil advocate argument itself, too, right? Like, Cody, in my eyes, and Seth are big enough characters where you can just throw them, and I know I did on this podcast, you can just throw them on the WrestleMania card, have a match, and then kind of play the story out after that for the next 6 months and lead into SummerSlam and have your big rematch, and then just go from there depending on your plans for the next 6 months to a year for Cody and for Seth for that matter. But I don't know, the closer we get, I kind of want to know now. Like, I don't, maybe it's just me, but I'm just kind of like over the speculation on if he's even signing with WWE or if he's going back to AEW, if he's going to be heading ROH, which apparently not, because Tony Khan said that he's going to be doing the booking for ROH and already has plans for that as well. So I'm just ready to kind of be done with the speculation. I'm kind of ready to be over the whole build to WrestleMania, and for whatever reason, like, I wish that tomorrow was the Raw after Mania and we were just starting fresh. And I feel like the Raw after Mania this year, more so than the past few, definitely, to say the least, it to me feels like the start of a new season for WWE, and it's going to be the start of a lot of new storylines and a lot of new directions going forward. So I think that's kind of why I'm excited and looking forward to that as well. But apparently, guys, it's official that Cody Rhodes has signed with WWE, and at this point, he did so. The initial reporting was 10 to 14 days prior, so at this point, by my recording, it's probably at least 2 weeks out, minimum, that he had apparently signed. So, yeah, if that's the case, I don't know what the holdup has been then. I don't know why you wouldn't have him show up in Jacksonville unless he didn't want to maybe stoop to that level or felt like it would have been disrespectful. Maybe they are going to hold off and have him make a surprise debut on Mania, or on Raw rather, tomorrow night. So that kind of sells the last minute tickets that are still floating around out there if they're still kind of pressed about that, and just build a little bit more hype up into Mania itself, because then you have the whole week building into it. So I think that there's a lot you still have going into it. I think I actually said this week was the go home week, which it's not, obviously. We still have about 2 more weeks going into it, like I said. But if I mentioned that if tomorrow night was the go home show, I apologize for that. But you guys know what I mean. If he's not going to debut prior to, like, I don't know, like, the more I sit here and think about it and kind of talk about it out loud, like, I'm just so conflicted with it and just so torn. And like I said, like, that's part of the reason why I'm just ready for the confusion to be over with and just the what ifs and what is he doing. So I think now, and like, I don't know, guys. I'm gonna wrap it up here because I'm gonna start irritating myself. But I think more so what I'm maybe a little bit happy about, if that is the confirmed case that he has signed, then cool. Like, at least we know that he's not going back to AEW right now, and can focus and start speculating on his WWE future. But I'm very anxious to see if he shows up prior to Mania and how they handle it, because like I know I've said before, I think his first appearance and his first sighting in WWE is going to be massive, and it's going to be massive in the sense that it's going to show us and be the answer to a lot of things. And of course, it's going to lead to even that many more questions, which is the point, right? But I think how they handle I'm just calling it a debut because this is, in my mind, a completely different Cody Rhodes. So the way they handle his debut, in my eyes, is going to be a very big deal and a very big sign to what that means for him going forward. So if he has officially signed, which, like I said, Mike Johnson is a pretty reputable source, and we all know Fightful is always pretty much spot on as well. So that's at least exciting, and at least knocks one what if off of the table. So now we can focus on the other 100 that are on there left. But I think too, like, it's a big deal for Seth Rollins as well. To kind of wrap it up here with the Cody portion of it. I think that Seth Rollins deserves to have answers too. And they very well may or have already had those answers, and may have had it for a month, and it's just us sitting here pulling our hair out, speculating like, oh, well, what about Seth? Like, I'm sure Seth is fine. Seth has been on plenty of WrestleManias at this point, has pretty much done everything, so I don't think we need to really worry about Seth, but I think it's just kind of the fun too, like I said, regarding the speculation. So we'll see what officially happens, and it'll be fun to see what, if anything, happens tomorrow night on Raw, or if they're going to save it for the go-home show, or if they're just going to have him debut on WrestleMania, or if like I originally kind of betted on too, he's just going to make his surprise debut on the Mania after. But I think at this point, with how heavy they've been going with Seth too the past couple weeks, and especially this past Monday with the whole fighting against KO for the opportunity, which I hate that they hijacked that word, but the opportunity to even host, and it's even bizarre to say it out loud, for Seth Rollins wanted to steal the hosting job on the KO show for Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania. So that's a clusterfuck in and of itself, so I'm not even going to get back into that. But moving on here with the WrestleMania card itself, like I said earlier, we're going to kind of address the updated version of the card we have here for night 1 and night 2, since we got a little bit more additions and a little bit more stipulations, it looks like, added here after this past week on SmackDown. The updated card for Saturday, April 2nd, night 1, of course, we have the SmackDown Women's Championship. Your, of course, champion going into it is Charlotte Flair, defending against your Women's Royal Rumble match winner for 2022, Ronda Rousey. A lot of speculation on if this match was going to end night 1, and if so, would that mean that the next match, of course, that's slated is your Raw Women's Championship match, with your champion being Becky Lynch defending against Bianca Belair. If the women were going to kind of bookend the night 1, right, WrestleMania night 1, and have Flair versus Rousey in the night, and have, Becky and Bianca start off the night, because I think we all know at this point too, if you're not main eventing, and by main eventing I mean closing the show, that you want to be opening the show, because those are the two most coveted spots on the card. And I think, in my opinion, I wouldn't be against that at all. But it's very interesting because you have KO in Austin, right? Like that's obviously going to be a big deal. They put a lot of hype into it, especially if they're going to have Austin be physical. There's been a lot of speculation where that may kind of overtake the whole main event being the women's slot this year, and with it even being an actual match. And that's the kind of blunder that you kind of put yourself in too, right? With Austin and KO not being an official match that at least is that we know of right now. Austin even said himself, call it a fight, a confrontation, whatever you want to call it, but it's not being built still as of right now as an actual match. So my opinion, I don't think you end the night like that. Like, I get why you would want to with having a feel good moment with Stone Cold, maybe doing the beer celebration to end night one with it being in Texas. So I get that, and it's not like I'm gonna sit there and shit on it or anything like that, but I don't know. I just feel like it's not right if you don't end it with an actual match. So in my opinion, I think if you're gonna have the women's matches both be on night one, both championship matches rather, I think that you go with what the obvious is, in my opinion, which is having Becky and Bianca open the match, or open the card rather, and having Flair and Rousey win. Now, I think you can kind of make an argument for that too, with not knowing for certain if Rousey is going to be a strong enough babyface character to send the fans home happy, you know. But I think in that respect, I kind of get it too, because what I think isn't it's going to be like monumental, groundbreaking news here. I think with Brock and Roman Reigns main eventing WrestleMania Night 2, and like I said, I think it's pretty certain that Reigns is going to retain his title. I think that Vince may be a little hesitant because his mindset and motto is always send the fans home happy, right? So if you don't do that on both nights, maybe that could be an issue. But I think, I don't know, like, to me, like, I don't really worry about stuff like that. And Ronda is a whole other story in and of herself. But yeah, I think that you play it safe here, and you have the women open and close the show, and then you maybe have Austin and KO kind of in the center and kind of anchoring the show throughout the card itself. So that would be my bet kind of going into it. But also what we have slated for night one, we have Drew McIntyre versus Happy Corbin, Rey and Dominic Mysterio versus The Miz and Logan Paul, the SmackDown Tag Team Championships, with your champions being the Usos defending against Shinsuke Nakamura and Rick Boogs. And of course, like I said earlier, we had the KO show being hosted by Kevin Owens officially with guest Stone Cold Steve Austin. So we will see what that ends up playing out to be. Night 2, the following night being April 3rd, we have the winner-take-all title unification match, which apparently WWE doesn't know what unification means. The Universal Champion being Roman Reigns defending, apparently, his title against the WWE Champion Brock Lesnar, of course defending his title as well, with obviously that being the whole definition of winner-take-all. We will see if they actually do that, and if it's actually a unification match itself, and what that ends up playing out to be. So again, I'm very much looking forward to the week after WrestleMania. I think maybe even more so than the week playing into it, which is kind of telling. But also on night 2, we have Edge versus AJ Styles with this new version of the dark and demented Edge character. I love that he switched up his music, and I love too that he's still stuck with Alter Bridge, because they are a very good band for wrestling music, it seems like, and for entrance music, and just the feel and the grittiness of it, no pun intended, or maybe pun intended. It's just a good fit there, so like that little inclusion there. We also have the Women's Tag Team Championships, with your champions being Queen Zelina and Carmella defending their titles against Sasha Banks and Naomi versus Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan versus newly added Natalya and Shayna Baszler as of this past SmackDown. My early prediction for that one is Sasha Banks and Naomi. I think they just need to merge this tag team division for both shows. I think if you're especially doing a unification match with the Men's World Heavyweight Championship, you might as well merge the two tag divisions for the women, and probably for the men as well, thinking about it. And just have the tag team champions as floating champions as well. But again, we'll probably get into that more so later on at a later date. We also have for night 2 the newly added stipulation, or lack thereof, rather, of the Sami Zayn versus Johnny Knoxville match. It is now an anything goes match, which is probably not surprising to a lot of people, and probably for the best. We're going to see probably some crazy shit from Johnny Knoxville, especially since we don't have Shane this year, so someone's going to do something obnoxious. So I think Knoxville is going to fit that role. And then we also have Pat McAfee versus Austin Theory, which I am actually very much looking forward to. I love the little story that they've actually kind of thrown together in this short amount of time. Like, yes, you can nitpick a lot of it, but I think Pat McAfee is a natural, and the promo that he did on SmackDown and how he carried the segment and just looked like a natural out there, in my opinion, is very telling. And I think that anything that McAfee is obviously involved in, he's not going to half-ass it. So, especially with it being at WrestleMania, for goodness sakes, like, dude is not going to just phone it in. So, that should be a fun match itself. We still have not had an official match for the Raw Tag Team Championships or the United States Championship or the Intercontinental title for that matter either. So we still have a few more matches kind of floating around out there that we don't really know what they're doing with. But as of right now, that is the updated WrestleMania card itself going into this year, and kind of wrap up the WWE side of things right now. But if anything else adds or breaks this week, like I said, I'm sure it's going to be a pretty busy 2 weeks going into WrestleMania itself. Definitely looking forward to it too. You know, I'm not going to say I'm sitting here very excited, and to be honest with you, I don't even think I'm going to be able to watch WrestleMania live. I'm probably going to have to watch it a few days later, since I don't think I will be home for WrestleMania that weekend, but I'll have a better idea of that in the next few days or weeks, obviously. But yeah, for my official plan. So I'll touch base on that. But moving on here, guys, to AEW. Quick contract update on one of my very, very, very top favorites, Miro. If you guys know me, you know I'm a huge fan of Miro. He apparently had signed an extension for 4 years, obviously lasting throughout 2026, towards the end of this past year. So definitely kudos to Miro and AEW. That's a good pickup and lockdown for both sides. So that's pretty exciting. But just wanted to touch base on that, and I hope that whatever Miro's doing, we see him soon, because I miss him on TV. Even that 30-second, 45-second minute promo package that we would get every week was always just something that stood out to me. So definitely miss him, and hope that, I don't think he has an injury, so I hope whatever he's out doing, he's good, and he makes his return soon. But we are running a little bit long here, so I'm going to kind of dive into the Dynamite card and give a quick roundup there. But I think this week in AEW was a little quiet-ish type, and which is kind of crazy to think. It's just, or maybe it's just with the Cody Rhodes and WrestleMania kind of dominating things lately, and then of course with Scott Hall, sadly, this week it just wasn't, AEW just wasn't topping the headlines, which is fine, you know, like it's everything and you know, fruition, and it's just weird. Like, I feel like normally my shows are AEW centric and heavy, and this week isn't as much. But moving on to the card itself, and we definitely did get a pretty stellar show, so definitely don't want to downplay that or put that perspective out there. But like I said, moving on to the card itself, it was a pretty stacked card, with the main event being what I think everyone was mostly looking forward to here itself. We did start the show off with the trios match with your champion Hangman Page teaming with Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus versus Adam Cole and Red Dragon. Pretty good match. I definitely was surprised by the outcome, though. I will say that I was surprised that Adam Cole and Red Dragon picked up the W here, which I'm happy about, but in my mind that means that they're progressing with Page and Cole and the story there. And I don't really know how to feel about that, because I kind of felt like the whole idea with Cole losing against Page at Revolution was because Cole has the story going on with him, Red Dragon, the Young Bucks, and potentially Omega whenever he comes back. But maybe with the reports that Omega is still going to be out for a little bit longer, and still has a couple surgeries coming up to kind of repair various things. Dude is like a machine right now. Like, he is out just getting so many surgeries and going through so much shit right now. So shout out to Kenny. I'm sure he's an avid listener to the pod, right? But of course, we just put all positivity and positive vibes out there for him. And again, I don't like saying a speedy recovery, because I don't think that anyone should rush a recovery. Just a safe and healthy recovery, and he takes the time that he needs. While of course it's obvious that we miss him, but my opinion and me personally, I don't want him to come back before he needs to. And I think with, like we all mentioned, and some of us even complain about, with how stacked the AEW card and roster is, he can afford, and AEW can afford for him to be out for a few months, even a year if needed. So again, just shout out to Omega out there. But I say that because I think with him taking some more time off, that may be why Cole is kind of staying in the crosshairs of Jungle Boy, Luchasaurus, and Hangman Page for that matter. But it'll be interesting to see if they go back to another rematch, right, for the title, or if they continue with the trios route, or if they, I don't know. Like, you just don't, you wouldn't picture Cole and Red Dragon winning and then them just moving on, because why would you beat your champs and then just not address it after that? And AEW is much smarter than that, so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But moving on here, next matchup we had was Jon Moxley and Bryan Danielson versus Wheeler Yuta and Chuck Taylor. Pretty good match, pretty straightforward, to the point, what you would expect. But I think the moment here obviously was what happened after the match, with Yuta kind of being addressed by William Regal, who had been on commentary during the tag match itself. Of course, you obviously had Bryan and Mox still in the ring as well, but Wheeler was kind of in the face of Regal, not being disrespectful or anything, but kind of discussing and having some words back and forth. And then William Regal out of nowhere just smacks the shit out of Yuta. And Yuta kind of fires up and gets in Regal's face, and they kind of shows a little bit of intensity, and Regal says pretty much like, can continue on your path and then see me in a few type shit. So very interesting development there, and it kind of makes sense with what Bryan had addressed, specifically naming Yuta in the past. So I like that we kind of got a little, I don't know if it's a seed being planted necessarily there, but I like that we got that addressed. And whether it's just that and then we move on and then it kind of address it in the next 6, 8, 12 months, whatever it may be. But I like that. So I like that little tie-in there. But moving on, we had the Jericho Appreciation Society commencement, I think is how they labeled it. Torn on this one, guys. As a whole, first of all, I think the name sucks. I don't like the name at all. I don't like the name of it being the group, right? And I think that, no offense to Jericho, I think I say that because I that's probably the point, right? Like, it's absurd, it's obnoxious, they're sports entertainers, like, it's the irony of it, right? So I get it, but it's just kind of cringy to me. That, and seeing Daniel Garcia actually call himself a sports entertainer, like, it just kind of felt sacrilegious to me. Like, it was just like what? Like, are you okay? Like, does he have a gun to your head type thing? Like, blink twice, dude. Like, are you under duress? Like, are you okay? Like, it just felt so out of place to me. Like, it was to that extreme. Yeah, and I think that that's kind of the whole point with this too. And I think the whole idea with this group is probably the focal point, depending on however long it lasts, being getting Daniel Garcia over to the next level. So I get the idea where they're going with, but it's just a little too much for me. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm gonna give this a few weeks to play out though and see the progression. But man, and I get it, and I get that my reaction is probably exactly what they were going for. But I just, seeing Daniel Garcia say that made me cringe, y'all. Between that and Jake Hager still being there, don't really know the purpose still, but besides him just standing there, like, dude legit has the easiest job in the world, so shout out to him for locking that and securing that role. But I don't know, but I'm gonna give this one a little bit more time to play out and see how it plays out. But yeah, not really a fan of it off the bat, and I don't know, I don't see this having as long of a shelf life as Inner Circle did. I think this is probably going to be 3 to 6 months max, with the whole idea being, like I said, to get Garcia over, and whether it's Garcia just breaking out on his own and then the rest of the society just doing whatever they want to do. I could see it playing out like that. But moving on here, next up we had the TNT Championship match, which was Wardlow facing off against your newly crowned champion, Scorpio Sky. Not really surprised with the outcome here, and to be honest, it was a little underwhelming to me, the match itself. I don't know, maybe that's a little strong, and I just wasn't as hooked into this match as I thought I was going to be, and as much as I maybe was looking forward to. But it accomplished its job, right? It had the return of MJF costing Wardlow the match. At the end of the match and at the end of the segment, we saw MJF give Dan Lambert and his crew a nice little stack there, which was kind of perplexing to me because they didn't really do much. Like, they were already in a match. Like I don't know if I'm MJF and giving out a nice stack like that, I want them to do a little bit more permanent damage or longer lasting damage to Wardlow than just that beatdown. Like, we see more vicious shit happen backstage than what MJF paid for. So maybe we'll see a continuation, but I don't think so, of the beatdown. But my opinion, Dan Lambert got over on MJF there. Like, MJF paid way too much for what they ended up doing. So again, the idea was just to actually set the table for MJF and Wardlow. So we'll get this match maybe at Double or Nothing, if not prior to then. So depending on the substance of the story and how deep they get into it, I think will determine when we get the, like, how quickly we'll get the match, I should say, and whether they are gonna have MJF being Hangman Page's opponent at Double or Nothing and what they're going to go in that direction. So we'll see with that. But moving on here, we had the debut of the Hardys, as they're officially going, not the Hardy Boys, which obviously probably makes sense since they're in their mid to late 40s. But yeah, we had the Hardys versus Private Party, and pretty straightforward. Nothing crazy happened here. We got the Hardys picking up the W. Good opponents, though, to start off with. In Private Party, it obviously made sense with the story and everything like that. But it was pretty much just like greatest hits for the Hardys. You know, like nothing, like I said, crazy here. But it was pretty cool to see the Hardys reunion. If you know me, am a big Hardy Boy fan, especially Jeff. So very cool to see him in AEW and get that first W under their belt, and to see how serious their role is going to be going forward. But the main focus point of this night in the match, or the card itself, was the main event match, being the steel cage match for the AEW Women's Championship. Your champion being Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, defending against the hometown hero of Thunder Rosa. She got the mariachi band for her entrance, which was very cool. And she changed up her makeup this week too, guys. It was a pretty cool visual. She did the whole full face paint and not just the half. Came out with the Texas flag and then of course her Mexico flag and everything like that to represent her heritage and where I'm pretty sure she was born in Mexico. And it was just obviously, I think they built her as a transplant to Houston, Texas, or San Antonio, Texas, I think, actually. More specifically, I think that's how they normally, when you're born in one place and live in another type thing. But yeah, the match itself was pretty bloody and pretty, I don't want to say, my opinion, their first encounter was more brutal and more violent than this. But I dug this match, you know, I enjoyed it. I think the end, they kind of had to rush it. And, you know, shit happens, you know, but I think that the match itself was cool and it was a good story that they told. I think, I don't know, I'm not going to say anything negative because I respect everything that they did, and especially what Britt Baker did and that chair bump and everything like that. Like, Britt really went out there to put on a show and a story and a good sell job for Thunder Rosa, and I say that because I saw a lot of people shitting on the lack thereof in the match. And some people were even saying that the thumbtacks weren't real, which I find kind of funny, that in 2022 we're questioning the realness of the thumbtacks. Like, I thought we all kind of had an understanding of what is and what isn't at this point, but whatever, moving on. Of course, here, it was pretty much a no-brainer that Thunder Rosa was going to get the victory here in her hometown with just the whole vibe and the whole setup, and seeing how emotional she was just a beautiful thing. And hearing her interview going into it with her family being present and her trainers and everyone in the area pretty much being ringside for her big moment was a very good feeling and a good moment. And just, man, it's just happy to see a wrestler in their hometown get a good payoff victory, you know what I mean? And just a good culmination. So I loved what they did with the confetti and everything like that, and having Dustin Rhodes come out and celebrate with her in the ring, and just seeing how emotional she was and how much that victory meant to her. It really solidifies and kind of reminds everyone of the importance of winning the title and how that should be every wrestler's focus point. That when you are in there and you get into the profession. Like, that should be what you want. You want to be the champion. And I kind of wish that more competitors, whether they're directly chasing for the title right then and there or not, I wish that more wrestlers would say that that's a lot, like, an immediate goal of theirs, you know, whether they're in that feud or not. So, that being said, shout out to Thunder Rosa and her journey and everything that she's been through and sacrificed to get to that moment. She definitely deserved it, and it's kind of sad, though, to see the ending of Britt Baker's run. You know, obviously I'm a big fan of hers, but I think that's going to transition her over to probably starting off with Jamie Hayter and addressing that. And then I could see that being a babyface turn for Britt, and then have her maybe change focus to Jade. I think that could be a nice match maybe 6 months from now, and after Jade has had a little bit more of a run, and it'll be a little bit more believable that Britt could kind of maybe take the title off of her. But that's where I could kind of see maybe Britt's early and or maybe short-term, long-term-ish future. Long-term meaning a year-ish out. But Dynamite this week was pretty good. I did not see the full Rampage show. It was a little bit late, and I was busy literally all day Saturday and kind of playing catch-up here today, and wanted to get a show out for you guys, so I did not see all of Rampage, but I heard it was a pretty decent show. Nothing, of course, groundbreaking with it being delayed because of the NCAA tournament and everything like that. So, like I said, guys, I'm going to kind of wrap it up here. Since I didn't see Rampage, I'm not going to comment too much on it. I did want to mention the card that we have for AEW Dynamite going forward next week, because I was kind of surprised on a match that we were getting here. The official preview for next week, we have the first showing of the Jericho Appreciation Society tagging together, and the representatives are Chris Jericho and Daniel Garcia, speaking of him, teaming up against Dark Order's John Silver and Alex Reynolds. So it'd be cool to kind of see the dynamic between Garcia and Jericho and who's the alpha and how that kind of plays out going forward. We have MJF speaking for the first time since the dog collar match, addressing that. Of course, addressing the whole Wardlow situation, and I'm sure we'll maybe get a Wardlow appearance out of that. So that should definitely be interesting itself. But the match that I was referencing that I'm surprised we're getting already is an 8-man tag? Yeah. So we have Sting and Darby Allin. I almost said Allen. Sting and Darby Allin teaming with the Hardys versus Private Party, The Butcher, and The Blade. And I was just kind of surprised when I saw that graphic that we were getting the team of Sting, Darby Allin, and the Hardys so soon, and kind of just, I don't know, with little build-up to it. I say little build-up just meaning, like, time. I don't know, like, I don't want to say a criticism I have with AEW, because it's I think that's a strong word in a too negative way. I'll just say maybe, like, where I would probably differ, where I would kind of milk situations in big matches like that, right? Like, you have the first time that Jeff Hardy and Sting have been in the ring together on TV in X amount of years. And of course, I'm not saying you should address specifically what happened, but that's a big deal. You have Jeff Hardy in the ring with Darby Allin. Like, there's just so much more you could be milking out of this. And I don't know, I just was very, very surprised to see them having that match this week coming up. But again, not complaining. I'm sure it's going to be a cool match, and maybe this match will be the starting point for maybe a Sting and Darby Allin versus the Hardy match at Double or Nothing feud, kind of building into that. So I don't know, but it was just a little interesting that we were starting off with that match. But as always, guys, I appreciate you so much for downloading and having me in your weekly lineup. Let me know what you guys think on Twitter at ASHMANNS, and the Twitter page for the show is at KickAshPodcast_, and also on TikTok at KickAshPodcast. So, like I say again, guys, I appreciate you for listening and for your feedback as always, and it's very cool, like I mentioned last week, to see the show continue to grow. So stay safe, guys. Have an awesome week, and we will touch base next week. Take care.